Ooh. Now, none of us can ban all the broken champions in the game, so it'd be pretty troll if you don't have a champion that can counter the popular picks you see in your role. Like we've all been there in Champ Select. We queue up for our role, but we're first pick, and because our teammates are more interested in watching the latest Arcane episodes than winning ranked games, our teammates won't swap with us, and we are going to get counterpicked, and we are going to auto-lose our lane. So in this video, the Jizz will reveal the 10 best champions in the game, 2 for each role, who are amazing to have in your locker to counterpick your opponent. Now just quickly, the preseason for Season 12 is so close, so to make sure you don't miss any of our preseason content, hit that subscribe button and let's get into it. Right, so let's start with the 2 top laners who are great to have in your arsenal to counterpick your opponent in Champ Select. Now one of these champions that Jizz has mentioned a heck of a lot recently because she's more broken than JJ on J4, so we'll start with a top laner who is an amazing pick into ranged top laners. So if you see Summoner 1 lock in Teemo, Gnar, Vayne, Vladimir, Mordekaiser who damages you from range, then insta-lock Aurelia. Not only are you going to 100% win against these champions, but you'll also win because the entire enemy team will be so tilted Aurelia didn't get banned. But seriously, Aurelia's incredible gap closing ability is way too fast for anyone to react to, and because these ranged champions are typically very squishy, landing one flawless duet is going to lead to a kill. Now she might not have the best win rate, but this is because Aurelia is picked a lot, and more often than not, blind picked, so you leave yourself open to get counterpicked by a Graves, let's say, when really you should be that guy. Now in terms of your runes and items, run Conquer as your keystone with the rest of this page, and make sure you build Blade of the Rune King first, then Immortal Shield Bow. This core makes you unbeatable against these ranged champions, and yeah, Gore Drinker did get buffed, but it's more suited to team fighting, rather than actually one-shotting our enemy. Remember, we are counter-picking to win lane and snowball, not to AFK and rely on our team. And if that setup isn't enough for you, run Flash and Ignite. Teleport is certainly a good summoner spell, but Ignite gives us a chance to crush lane and makes our all-in even scarier. If the enemy missteps just once, they are gone. But what about if the enemy champion locks in a melee champion in the top lane? Well, I have mentioned Quinn so much in recent videos because she is so darn good. And even if she wasn't good, it's just that her mechanics and her kit make it impossible to play against her if you're a short-range melee champion. So if someone locks in Darius, Riven, Fiora, any of these bruisers fighters, as Quinn you are going to have an absolute field day. Even though that recent nerf to your W, 20% less attack speed at rank 5, this has for sure brought that oppressiveness down a bit. But here's the thing guys, press the attack, didn't get nerfed like Conqueror, and you don't build Gore Drinker. So the fact your runes and items haven't been touched in ages puts you in a really good position, unlike most top laners in recent patches. Now for your items, make sure you're getting Shield Bow with Berserker's Greaves, Wit's End, and then you can finish this with really a variety of items. Lord Dominant's Regards is great into champions who are tanky with a bit of armor, or Stormrazor. This is really good into squishy enemy champions and maybe champions who are kind of hard to stick to. Because you'll be slowing them with that auto attack, it just makes it easy to get off your DPS. So Aurelia and Quinn guys are the 2 top laners you should definitely consider learning and actually picking to counter these players who might lock in a melee or ranged top laner. Now we're going to switch it up here guys and head to the bot lane and talk about the 2 counterpick champions you should have ready to lock in if you're playing AD carry. And the first of these AD carries is an unreal pick into champions who don't have much mobility, or they might rely on hitting their skill shots. So if you lock in Vayne, because you have so much mobility, it's going to be very hard for these champions to get away, let's say a Jhin, and it's also going to be hard for skill shotters like Ezreal to actually hit you, because your tumble is on a very low cooldown and you can dodge pretty much everything he throws at you. But why wouldn't you blind pick Vayne if she's that good? Well, think about champions like Caitlyn, or maybe the other AD carry we're about to talk about, because Vayne is short range. Against a lot of range, so Caitlyn, she is going to get bullied and harassed in the early laning phase. So really you want to be picking Vayne knowing that the bot lane is going to be free, so you can scale for free. This is when you get really strong in the mid to late game. That's when you become that hyper carry. But we won't actually get to that position if you blind pick Vayne and the enemy team picks Caitlyn. Now in terms of your runes, it's very standard with press the attack. And as far as your items go, we're going Immortal Shield Bow, Ginsu's, and Wit's End. This build is all about on hit and maxing your W first. Do not max your Q first. And I would just say as well guys, when you're playing Vayne and fighting these immobile AD carries or skill shot AD carries, you are saving your tumble for the actual skill shot that's coming at you. And probably don't tumble in a straight line. This is going to make it way too predictable where you're going to be, so queuing to the side and around the enemy champion, like they will not be able to hit you and they'll have 0 HP left and you'll still be on full HP. But what about if the enemy team picks a really short range AD carry like a Vayne? And even better, what about if the enemy team composition, which for the most part is going to be like this in lower elos, just has a bunch of melee champions? Maybe they have Yasuo or Yone in the mid lane, maybe they have Darius top lane and then Echo in the jungle. These are all very close range champions, so picking Xayah as your AD carry, this is just a great all-around pick. Now I understand your ultimate is still on a 3-minute cooldown at rank 1, it's not very nice to deal with, but here's the thing guys, when you have this up, no one should be able to deal damage to you for a few seconds, so you bait those melee champions into jumping onto you, and then because you'll have your feathers out, you can hit so many of these enemy enemy champions and you will one-shot everyone. Even if you don't, they're going to be rooted so your teammates can peel you and deal the damage that you can't. And one interesting thing about Xayah at the moment is she is super strong right now. Across all elos, she has around a 52% win rate, and that's because people are finally maxing their Q and also going airy as their keystone. So when you're playing around as your poke and not actually maxing your E and playing around lethal tempo. So airy with a Q max, this poke-based playstyle is actually the best way to play Xayah, and it's also really popular, guys, at the moment to build Eclipse with Manamune and Cyrilda's Grudge. So no more Gale Force, Essence Reaver, Infinity Edge, we're going full lethality Xayah. But please, guys, make sure you play like this in the laning phase. Do not be scared to harass the enemy champions. Poke them when they go for a CS, poke them when they don't have their cooldown, poke them when their support is AFK. Be aggressive and look to poke them out of lane. How many times did I just say poke? So let's stay in the bot lane, guys, and talk about the two supports you should have in your locker to counter pick the enemy champion. And one of these enemy champions might be someone like a Thresh, a Blitzcrank, a Nautilus, a hook-based CC champion. So why don't we pick Morgana? Because of your black shield, like surely we've all experienced this, right? Playing a hook champion or a CC champion and the enemy team locks in a Morgana. It really just ruins your day. You can never really go in because that black shield exists, and you really have to hope that the Morgana is first timing her to actually catch one of your opponents off guard in the bot lane. Now, as far as your runes go on Morgana, we're going Comet, which procs really easily off your W, and we're also going perfect timing in our secondary tree inspiration. This is so we can rush a Zhonya's Hourglass as our first item, and yes, you heard me correctly, Zhonya's is your first item. Not Shirelia's battle song, screw the mythic, we are going all out cooldown and all out utility. I mean, even though Shirelia's is giving you both of those things, Zhonya's just allows you to make more plays. You can flash in with your ultimate and then Zhonya's, so the enemy champions cannot touch you, but your teammates can touch them. So if the enemy team, guys, locks in a support who heavily relies on CC, and you actually want to peel your AD carry like a good support should do, Morgana is by far the best pick in the support role. But this next champion I'm going to recommend, this is actually more if the enemy team has a lot of skill shots and maybe they're close range champions. So Morgana definitely still works, but picking Braum is actually just more reliable because as Morgana you can't black shield all of your teammates, but as Braum you can do a heck of a good job at blocking all their skill shots coming at you because you're unbreakable and because your passive is so easy to proc on your auto attacks, on your Q, on your ultimate, which can hit multiple enemy champions if the enemy team comp is close range. A bit like why I said Xayah was a good pick for the AD carries, Braum just does the same thing but from a support role. Now for sure in the laning phase you can get poked down a lot by ranged supports, so Lulu, Nami, but into champions like Leona, Alistar, these melee champions who you're actually going to be allowed to auto attack, Braum's value increases tenfold. And with Braum you're still going Guardian with attack speed in your minor ins, and as far as your items go, Lock of the Eye and Solari, all very standard stuff here. Now what about the mid lane, guys? So who are the two best mid lane champions to counter pick in 11-22 and maybe even to the start of the preseason? Well, the first of these I'm going to recommend is the champion who is the ultimate anti-mage champion, and this of course is Kassadin. So because your passive Voidstone is reducing the enemy's magic damage dealt to you and your Q is actually giving you a magic damage shield, how can these mages in the mid lane do any damage to you? Well, they can, don't get me wrong, especially in the early game before level 6, but guys, it should be easy to navigate out of this early game because they do nowhere near as much damage to you as other champions. So you should really get to your ultimate spikes at level 6, at level 16, pretty much free of charge, and also your item spikes. So your Mythic Everfrost, your Archangel Staff with the tier stack, and then Zhonya's Hourglass. Now I understand that Fleet Footwork got nerfed, and this is probably the most consistent keystone, but I also recommend to you guys taking Electrocute if the enemy champion in the mid lane and most of the enemy champions in that game are one-shottable. Electrocute is going to give you way more burst damage, of course. Fleet Footwork is really to be taken into those lanes where you might take a bit of early harass so you can actually get out of it and just not die. But let's say you want to play a bit more of an aggressive early game champion, well then Akali is certainly a better pick than Kassadin for the laning phase. But here's the thing, guys, Akali is not all the time going to work. So if the enemy mid lane has some sort of range, Akali is not going to be as good as other champions. But if the enemy champion is a close range melee champion, let's say Yasuo, let's say Zed, let's say Talon, let's say Echo, Akali is going to pop off against these champions because you can actually use your passive, which got buffed in 11-22, and because you're such a good counter to these champions with your Shroud and then your E, which recreates space so they can't do damage to you, you have so much agency in these lanes. Now as far as your keystone goes, you can take Fleet Footwork or you can take Conqueror. So you can take Fleet if you think the enemy champion might poke you down a bit. Even if they're a melee champion like a Zed, you might take a bit of damage, but taking Conqueror because we're picking Akali as a counter pick champion is probably going to be the best keystone. Now as far as your items go, getting Hextech Rocket Belt is definitely the best item rush, and follow this up with Sword Shoes, Zhonya's Hourglass, and then really whatever you need to be the enemy team composition. So Death Cap if you're snowballing and they're squishy, Demonic Embrace if they're a bit tanky, a Void Staff if they already have magic resist, or even Morellonomicon if they have a lot of self-healing. So Kassadin and Akali, guys, are the two mid mid lane champions you should definitely consider counter picking for in 11.22. Now the last counter picking role we have to think about, guys, this is the jungle, of course. Now the first champion I'm going to recommend, if the enemy team picks Lee Sin, in fact if they pick any melee champion who might jump onto you, Kha'Zix who's really popular as well, then you have to lock in Rek'Sai. Because your knock up from your burrowed form, this can cancel so many abilities. So think of a Kha'Zix leaping onto you. Think of a Lee Sin jumping onto you with his Q. Because you can knock these champions up in mid-air, like how do you lose the 1v1? Now the Conqueror nerf as well that came in hasn't really affected Rek'Sai simply because your damage it just happens so quickly. It's not like you need to wait around for cooldowns. And on Rek'Sai, guys, make sure you're going Prowler's Claw with Edge of Night, then Sterit's Gauge, or you can go Guardian's Angel if you feel as if you need the armor against the heavy AD composition. But Prowler's Claw is the real shining light here. The active is so useful for Rek'Sai because it allows you to gap close pretty much instantly and knock up that target and then just one-shot them. But let's say you don't want to play a melee champion to counter these type of fighters and bruisers in the jungle, and maybe your team needs a bit of AP. Well then Nidalee is your next best bet, and the main reason Nidalee is so good is because she outranges pretty much everyone in the jungle. So even if you're playing a ranged jungler like Graves or Kindred, the fact that Nidalee just outranges you makes it super hard to play against her for pretty much anyone. She has decent clear speed, especially in the mid to late game. You start one-shotting camps. She has very good skirmishing, and her ganks as well, if your team has a lot of CC, are really potent too. Just make sure, guys, that in the 1v1s in the jungle, you are staying in your range form as long as possible. Jumping in can sometimes be pretty risky, so just use your range advantage until you land a spear or until the enemy champion is trying to escape. You can pounce them down. Now, as far as your runes go, we're taking Dark Harvest, and the rest of this tree is very standard stuff. And as far as your items go, make sure you're going Hextech Rocket Belt, which might sound a little bit weird, but you're really going it for the magic penetration. This allows you to one-shot pretty much anything on the Rift, and also make sure you're going Sorcerer Shoes for more magic penetration, and you don't actually realize how useful the dash is until you actually use it. There's so much application for it. Now after this, you can go Sonya's Hourglass, Morella Nomicon, Voice Stuff, just build whatever it is you need to beat the enemy team composition. So those 10 champions, guys, were the 10 picks that are amazing counter picks for 11.22, and they will probably be so for the preseason as well. So if you did enjoy the video, please let us know by leaving a like down below. Also make sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out, and also make sure to check out the GameLeap website linked in the description and comment section. Challenger courses and guides, high elo font analyses, we have everything you need to improve as a player, so make sure you sign up. And until tomorrow's daily upload, this has been a cheers.